The retiring pastor is sitting in your office across from you. Been through a succession plan, and the succession plan is solid. I mean, the timeline is clear. But as you look at him, his hands are shaking. And he looks at you and he says, what if the next person changes everything I build? Sound familiar? Let's talk about it today here on the Healthy Church Staff Podcast. We've been in the middle of a series. Hi, my name's Todd Rhoades, one of the co-founders over at chemistrystaffing.com. We've been in a series this week on succession, kind of a different type of a series on succession. We kind of started off on when you should start and why you should start. And today we're going to talk about, yesterday we talked about you're getting ready to hand that baton over. And today we're going to continue that a little bit. Yesterday we talked about getting your congregation and your church kind of emotionally ready. Today we're going to talk about the leader, about you. If you're the senior pastor, you're the one that's handing off the baton. We're talking about the successee, not the successor. And this can be quite a bit of an earthquake for you, because chances are you've been in ministry a long time. Maybe you've been at your church a long time. You've spent your life loving these people, loving this church, loving this community, building into people. And in many ways, you feel like this church has been your baby. And that walking away is going to be incredibly difficult. That's what I call the identity earthquake. Most leaders don't realize how much of their identity is wrapped up in their role at the church. And that's not just senior pastors. That's every staff member. A lot of times our identity is really, really wrapped into our role or our ministry. And a lot of leaders just don't realize it. I mean, 20 years of Pastor Mike doesn't just disappear. And when you say transition timeline, Pastor Mike is kind of thinking this is going to be the death of a major part of my life. The fear really isn't most of the time about the church failing. It's about who they'll be when they're not the guy or the gal anymore. And I think that's a good thought to have, because we usually miss this. We focus, I've seen a lot of churches when they're going through succession, they focus on the logistics and they miss the grief. They're mourning a version of themselves that's ending. The what if spiral becomes just absolutely paralyzing sometimes. I mean, what if they undo my legacy? I mean, what if people forget what I contributed? What if I come back in 6 months and nobody remembers my name? Those are the kind of questions that haunt a lot of people. And I'm not saying that those are bad feelings. I'm saying those are the feelings that you have when you retire or when you move on after being a lead pastor or a staff member in a certain role for a certain amount of time. Now, listen, I don't want you to think that these fears are weaknesses, because they are not weaknesses. These fears are, quite frankly, just human. And they're why succession conversations so many times stall out, because this is really heady stuff. This is emotional stuff. This is heady stuff. These are the things that most people want to avoid because they're not comfortable. It takes an emotional toll. So let's talk a little bit more about maybe a roadmap for some of the things that you're going to go through. Start with some identity work, not the transition logistics. Okay. Kind of separate those out, right? Separate them separate, your worth from the role. And ask yourself, what parts of my calling will continue after this role? Just because you're not on staff or you're not senior pastor at this church, God still has a calling on your life. It doesn't end on your last Sunday. What do you want to do with your life post what you're doing now? And as you look at the calling that God placed on your life, what parts of that calling will continue? I don't know that I've known hardly any pastor that retires and actually retires. Or maybe they're not at retirement age, they're just going to do a succession plan, but they go and they do something else. So what parts of your calling will continue after this role, and create some space to grieve what's ending and celebrate what you're passing on and not just what you're leaving. You really need to envision this next chapter before you close this first one. You don't want to start having that thought conversation with your spouse the day after your last Sunday and say, all right, now what? That's a killer. That's a killer. Don't just hand off the baton, though. Plan that narrative. I mean, what story do you want to be told about your leadership? How do you want to be remembered? What does success look like 5 years from now at the church? Your emotional health affects everyone. And if you're anxious about letting go, believe me, your board and your congregation is going to feel it. Succession planning without all of this really, really hard emotional work is just reorganization. Here's the bottom line for today. You can't manage what you don't acknowledge. And every leader stepping aside is facing an identity crisis, whether they admit it or not. This week, I want to challenge you to sit down and really take some time to think. If you're headed up toward a succession or a passing of the baton, think about this. What are you most afraid about losing when you step aside? Think about that, pray about that, and then figure out how you can make that happen. What are you afraid of losing? And then how do you not lose that? Because there's hope on the other side of this. Matter of fact, there's a lot of freedom on the other side of this. It just looks different. Well, we've worked with a lot of senior pastors that have gone through a transition. We've walked hand in hand with a lot of pastors that have walked into a transition when their longtime senior pastor has gone out. And we've seen a thing or two because we've talked to a lot of people and worked with a lot of people. So if you need somebody, and I would encourage you, if you're going through succession, don't do it alone. This is one of those times where you need a good friend, a good colleague, or a coach, or a consultant. Yeah, I know the consultant word, but you really do need somebody that has a different set of eyes and ears, that's not so close to your conversation. Maybe doesn't have a dog in your fight per se, that's been there, done that, and has seen the good, the bad, the ugly about these types of transitions. And it doesn't have to be chemistry. There's a lot of folks out there that do it, a lot of organizations that help with this as well. But if you'd like to reach out to me, you can do that anytime. Todd.church. Todd.church is my website, and there's a form there where you can reach out to me and just say, hey, Todd, I'd love to have a conversation with you about succession. Maybe you're a senior pastor, maybe you're a worship or a youth guy, and you're thinking about this. Maybe you're a board member or a congregation member. I'd love to chat with you. So you can reach out to me there. And it's Friday. I hope you go and you have a good weekend. And I will see you right back here. We'll be back again, God willing, on Monday for another episode of the Healthy Church Step Podcast. Thanks so much. I appreciate you joining me.